It was Mother's Day. I woke up earlier than usual. I slipped into the blue cardigan Dennis gave me 10 years ago. He's probably forgotten all about it, but I haven't. Back then, he'd just started working. He saved up for 2 months to buy me that sweater. He used to call me Mom back then, say things like, "You worked so hard." I pinned up my hair, dabbed on a little makeup, and took out the lemon butter cookies I'd baked the night before, 2 dozen neatly packed in a clear jar. I told myself if Dennis had something planned, I probably wouldn't need to bring anything, but, well, it never hurts to be prepared. The clock had just struck 8 when the phone rang. It was Dennis. I waited a few seconds before picking up, on purpose. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice tired. "Are you free today?" I smiled. "Of course. Could you come help out at the restaurant? It's a bit chaotic today. Tina called in sick and we're short-staffed." I paused. "You mean at the restaurant?" I kept my voice light, like I was afraid if I spoke too loudly, the dream might disappear. "Yeah, just for a few hours. Maybe help with dishes, keep an eye on the front. You've always said you get bored at home." I glanced at the jar of cookies on the kitchen table, forcing my voice to stay cheerful. "Of course I can come by." "Great," he sounded more upbeat. "We open at 10 o'clock. Try to get here early." He hung up just as quickly as he'd called. I stared at the screen for a long time after the call ended. The only sounds left in the room were the ticking of the wall clock and the quiet drip of the coffee maker. I told myself it was just part of the act, that he had something planned, that I was walking into a setup, a surprise hug, a bouquet of flowers, or even just a "thanks, Mom." I changed into more comfortable shoes, slipped the cookie jar into my tote, and wrapped a pale gray scarf around my neck. The sun was bright outside. I put on my sunglasses before stepping out, just in case I ran into someone I knew. You should always look put together, especially on a day like this. The restaurant wasn't far. I built it myself 20 years ago, brick by brick. Back then, walking this stretch of sidewalk meant someone would always stop me, a neighbor asking if we'd added anything new to the menu. But ever since I retired and handed it over to Dennis, people just said, "Oh, he's running it now." And that was the end of the conversation. I gripped the steering wheel and parked out front. Through the glass window, I saw Dennis bent over, talking to one of the kitchen guys. He did look a little frazzled. I opened the door, the bell chimed overhead. He didn't turn around. "You're here. The sink's fixed. Start over there." I froze. My heartbeat clenched in my chest like a fist. He didn't look at me, didn't say, "Happy Mother's Day." I walked to the back, took off my cardigan, hung it on a hook, and tied the apron myself. The kitchen was alive with noise, woks clanging, oil sizzling, someone yelling, "Tick it up!" and the dishwashing machine chugging in rhythm. I slipped my hands into the warm water and began scrubbing plates, repeating in my head, "It's okay. He'll come back later. Maybe he's waiting for everyone to be here so he can make it a big thing." But noon came and went. He didn't show. Someone called me out to help in the front. He was there, directing staff, adjusting the menu board, and smiling at a customer. "We've got a Mother's Day special today," he told her cheerfully. He knew what day it was. As I stood in the dining room, 3 familiar faces walked in, longtime regulars. Mary, one of them, lit up, grabbing my hand. "You're still here! We thought you'd retired ages ago." I was just about to answer with a smile when Dennis walked over, clapped a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Her? She's just here helping with the dishes." The room went still. One of the older women frowned. "Isn't she your mom? I thought this place was hers." Dennis gave a dry little cough. "It was a long time ago. She hasn't run things in years. She's too old to keep up. Today was just a lucky coincidence. She happened to be free." The woman looked at me, then at him, her face tight with something I couldn't quite name. I smiled. "Welcome back. This place still tastes like home." They nodded, thanked me, and I turned to go back to the kitchen. As I returned to the sink, my vision blurred. Steam from the water rose around me like fog, but I felt cold, so cold. A pot lid clattered to the floor, a sharp metallic crash slicing through the kitchen noise. I used the moment to slip out the back, pretending I just fetched a new bottle of dish soap from the storage room. I tossed the empty one into the recycling bin. As I bent down to open the cabinet, my knee cracked audibly. I winced. The kitchen heat pressed down like a damp blanket, and my back was already soaked through. A group of young cooks crowded around the stove, barking orders, moving fast. Not one of them turned to look at me. There was a time I ran this kitchen, commanding a team of over a dozen. I knew when a burner needed a new cap, knew which pan cooked meat with the best sear. I was the backbone of this place, the center everyone orbited around. Now I was just the old lady doing dishes. The door chime rang from the front. I didn't look up, but the voice was unmistakable. Someone said, "Mrs. Green's here today." I was just thinking about her roast chicken pie last week. My hand stopped mid-motion, heart jarring in my chest. I knew exactly who it was, Mrs. Green, one of our oldest regulars. She and her husband came every Saturday, ordered the same thing, sat in the same booth. A bit of a chatterbox, but she had a refined palate. I peeked around the corner. She stood at the counter in sunglasses, grinning brightly. I couldn't help myself. I walked over. "Hi, Mrs. Green, it's so good to see you." She pulled off her glasses, and the moment she recognized me, clasped my hand. "Oh my gosh, Mary, you're really here. Your son never told us you were back. Are you making the chicken pie again?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak, Dennis's voice cut in, familiar but flat. "She's not in the kitchen today, Mrs. Green." He came over, smiling, eyes flicking with something close to irritation. "She's not really working here. She's just our neighbor helping out because we're short-staffed." Mrs. Green blinked. She looked from him to me. "But she used to run this place. She was the owner, right?" Dennis chuckled lightly. "That was a long time ago. I run things now. She's been retired for years, just enjoying life." For a moment, the whole world went silent. I stood beside him, close enough to touch, but it felt like I was watching from behind glass, seeing him speak but hearing nothing familiar in his voice anyway. Dennis continued. "Jerry's our head chef now. His Italian specials are great. Want to give the lasagna a try?" I stood there frozen, listening to them talk like I wasn't even there. Mrs. Green gave me a quick, uncertain look before nodding. "All right, then. I'll have the chicken lasagna." I turned around and walked back to the kitchen, my fingers clenched around the edge of my apron. That line, "She's just our neighbor," rattled in my ears like a saw. Back at the sink, I gripped the faucet for balance. My fingers stiffened, knuckles tight. I turned the water on. It rushed out, masking every other sound. I stared at the dishes, unfocused, until a young man walked over and handed me a tray caked with sauce. "Hey, this one needs to soak before you scrub it." Behind me, the kitchen buzzed. Voices, footsteps, the clanging of pans, the door chime ringing again. But all I could hear was my heartbeat, loud and slow, pressing down on my chest. I remembered the first time Dennis brought a girlfriend home. I'd cooked all day, every dish he loved as a child. And in the living room, I overheard him tell her, smiling, "That's my mom. She's a great cook. But she's just a restaurant owner. Not anyone important." He used the word just. For years I told myself he was young, didn't know better, didn't mean harm. But today I'm 60 years old and I'm still being tucked into the back of the house like some worn-out pot, my name wiped clean, my presence erased. Just before closing, Dennis finally came into the kitchen. He slipped his keys into his pocket, his face tired, casual, like this was all perfectly normal. "Today was exhausting," he said. "Thanks for helping out, Mom." I looked up, staring at him for a long moment. He said Mom, but the way he said it, it had the same weight to saying, "Don't forget to take out the trash." "Do you have something you want to say to me?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He frowned. "What do you mean? What day is it?" He glanced at me, puzzled. "Mother's Day? Why?" I gave him a faint smile. "No reason, just wanted to make sure you knew." He shrugged. "Mom, don't be so sensitive. You always say you're bored. This way, at least you were useful. We really do appreciate it." "Appreciate it," I echoed, so softly it barely registered. He didn't say another word, just turned and left. I stood there staring at the plates, the soap suds already drying in dull, crusty rings. I pulled off my apron, fingers trembling, heart hollow. It was time to go back home. I sat on the bench by the front door for a long while, staring at nothing until the cold crept up through my soles. Then I slowly removed my shoes, changed clothes, and tossed the apron into the laundry basket. The kitchen clock ticked, tick, tick, as if marking every minute of that long, invisible day. I didn't turn on the lights. I poured a glass of water, sat at the dining table, and stared at the old clock on the wall. It was the same old clock I'd brought home from the restaurant more than 20 years ago. On opening day, I'd hung it just behind the register. The hour hand had circled that face for nearly 2 decades, never once running fast or slow. But now I wasn't the woman who kept everything running like clockwork. I was just a neighbor who happened to be around. My fingers tapped absent-mindedly against the table. A tightness bloomed suddenly in my chest, like something had lodged there and wouldn't move. I stood up and walked to the storage room, pulling open a brown wooden box, the one where I kept old things I couldn't quite part with. On top were a few ledger books, stacked neatly. The thickest one had a yellowed sticker on the cover, 2001 to 2016. I pulled it out and flipped to the first page. My handwriting was still there, clean, deliberate, drawn in ballpoint pen. Row after row of purchase records, monthly payrolls, customer traffic summaries, thank you notes from regulars, and scribbled feedback on laminated menus. That was my labor, written in ink, the memory of my life poured into columns and receipts. I remembered our first winter after opening back in '96. The stove leaked gas constantly. Every night I'd wrap a towel around the intake vent and sleep nearby just to make sure we'd still have a usable kitchen by morning. The following spring, I upgraded the plumbing and hired my first employee, Kathy, a young woman recently divorced with a baby girl in tow. She was fast in the kitchen, always humming while she chopped vegetables, and sweet as honey to the customers. I told myself back then this restaurant couldn't just be my livelihood, it had to be a shelter for someone else too. A few pages later, I saw our first food festival entry. I'd used my homemade pickles as a burger topping, and to my surprise, we won Most Popular Dish. I still remember Dennis standing in the crowd wearing a wrinkled t-shirt giving me a rare thumbs up. That night, he even said, "Mom, you're amazing." That was the last time he spoke to me like that, right before high school. After he started 9th grade, he never brought friends to the restaurant again. Said it smelled too greasy, too old school, too low end. I overheard him once telling a classmate, "My mom runs a little food place. It's nothing big, just some small business. She works really hard." He said just, like it was a flaw, like hard work was something to be pitied, like it made me small. I didn't argue. I told myself he's just a teenager. One day he'll understand. One day he'll come back around. But over the next few years, he drew a thicker and thicker line between me and whatever image he had of failure. When he applied for college under family background, he wrote, "Single-parent household, mother owns a small shop." He never once posted a photo of the restaurant on social media, never mentioned to his girlfriends that his mom owned a diner. I knew, always knew, but still, on every birthday, I'd wake up early and make his favorite blueberry pancakes, and every late night prepping stock in the kitchen, I'd whisper to myself, just a few more years. Once he's settled in his career, I can retire then. Out of the blue, when he turned 32, he showed up at my door. He'd just quit his job and said he wanted to start a little business. He said, "Mom, you've worked hard all your life. Don't you think it's time to rest? Maybe let me take over the restaurant. I can carry on your legacy." I froze, on the verge of tears. I thought he'd finally seen me, finally understood. But I didn't know that he'd already taken out a second mortgage on his house, that his car was days away from being repossessed, that Mag had screamed at him until she locked herself in the bedroom. He wasn't worried about me. He was out of options. Mag had once said to me over the phone, the restaurant was going to be ours eventually. Might as well hand it over to Dennis now and save everyone the hassle. Her tone was like she was talking about cashing in an expired check. The day I stepped down, I gathered all the staff, handed out red envelopes, and told them I was finally going to rest. Maybe travel, maybe learn something new just for me. They cried. I smiled and told them not to, but the truth was I wasn't ready to say goodbye. I thought giving it to him was the greatest gift I could offer, but that gift became the first excuse they used to erase my name. I looked down at the ledger. Tucked into the back cover was a photo of all of us, Kathy on the left flashing a peace sign. Behind her stood Tom, the head chef, Emily, the waitress, Marlon, the cashier, and Dennis in the corner, awkward but smiling. I traced the photo with my fingertips and realized I hadn't lost everything just today. I started fading from my own story the moment I said the words, "I'll let go." I closed the ledger with a long, steady breath. The next morning, I made myself a cup of Earl Grey, repackaged the leftover lemon butter cookies into little baggies, and neatly put the ledgers back into the storage cabinet. Those books felt like ballast, heavy, unmoving, but they gave me just enough weight to stay grounded. I wasn't planning to make a scene. I wasn't going to bring up what happened. I just wanted to have a real conversation. It had been a long time since Dennis and I sat down face to face and actually talked. Not him barking from the kitchen, not him calling to ask if I could cover for someone, not that flat, "Thanks, Mom. Really appreciate it," with exhaustion and distance baked into every syllable. I called him. "Let's do lunch," I said softly, "just the two of us. There's something I want to talk about." He hesitated. Then, Mag will come too. She's working from home this week. I paused, then said, all right, the three of us. I made a reservation at a little Italian place nearby, an old rival of mine from my restaurant days. The owner was about my age, a different philosophy. He believed in hype, I believed in word of mouth. We'd competed, clashed, even respected each other. He'd passed the business to his son after retirement. The flavor stayed the same. I got there 10 minutes early, ordered 3 waters and a basket of handmade sesame bread. When they walked in, I stood and smiled. Dennis wore casual clothes, eyes tired. Mag wore a sleek blazer, polished, her expression carrying a barely masked weariness. Hi, Mom, Dennis mumbled as he sat. Do you remember this place? I asked. Yeah, he said, flipping open the menu. You used to bring me here all the time. He avoided my eyes. I didn't bring up yesterday. I didn't bring up the sting or the way his words scraped across my chest. I just wanted to try once, to speak as a mother, not a victim, to say my piece without crying, without accusing. I was hurt yesterday, I began, my voice calm. Not because I was washing dishes, not because you asked me to help. They stayed quiet, waiting. What hurt, I said, was watching you pretend I wasn't your mother. Watching you act like the restaurant had nothing to do with me, that we didn't build it together. Dennis set the menu down, brow furrowing. Mom, that's not fair. When did I ever deny you were my mom? Mag's eyes darted up and she cut in sharply. Come on, Mary. Yesterday was a work day, not a family dinner. You said yourself you were just helping out, so we kept things professional. I looked at both of them, said nothing. Mag shrugged. And let's be honest, you're retired. What kind of treatment are you expecting? You were just lending a hand, right? Something in my chest squeezed shut. Her tone made it sound like I was there to show off, like my presence was a vanity project. I turned to Dennis. That restaurant is what I built, brick by brick. I handed it to you because I trusted you. I thought it meant something. But you changed the menu, replaced the staff, and won't even say my name when someone asks who I am. He looked annoyed. Mom, you're just being sensitive. Mag's right. If you're still going to hover over everything, then what was the point of handing it off to me? I'm not trying to interfere, I said, softer now. All I wanted was for you to say, even just once, this is my mother. She used to run this place. That would have been enough for me, just that. He let out a breath, something between a laugh and a sigh of impatience. You always need to be the center of attention, he muttered. Every time you show up, the staff flocks to you. You realize? Your kind boss thing throws everything off. They stop listening to me. Mag set down her knife and fork carefully, then leaned forward. Let me be direct, Mary, she said coolly. If you still want to be the heart of the restaurant, then your retirement was a failure. She paused, her voice like ice. If you want to come back, just say so. But if this is about needing to feel important, please stop getting in the way. I went quiet. Right then it hit me. I couldn't keep hoping they'd see me. Not as I was. Not anymore. You know, I said after a moment, the year your dad died, I nearly sold that place. My voice was quiet. I couldn't do it alone. I was up at 3 a.m. buying produce, chopping, managing bills. I wanted to quit so many times. But you, Dennis, you told me, don't give up, Mom. You said one day I'll take it over. He looked at me. His face didn't shift much. I nodded. Well, then. I placed my napkin on the chair and stood. I won't interfere with the restaurant anymore, and I won't wait for you to say what I wish you would. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked out of the little restaurant. When I got home from that miserable lunch, I didn't take off my shoes. I leaned against the doorframe, fingers still clenched around the strap of my bag. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because something in me had finally settled. I knew without a doubt that it was over. Dennis and Mag were like 2 steel walls, pushing me out until there was nothing left between us. You always need to be the center of attention. You're just here to help out. You're retired, don't meddle in the younger generation's business. Those lines weren't just spoken, they were nailed into my ears. I couldn't pull them out, couldn't forget them. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, until the phone rang and startled me. It was Linda. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. Hey, Mary, she said, her voice warm and familiar, like a freshly steeped cup of tea. I just came out of Whole Foods. They've got a fresh batch of those pumpkin cookies you used to love. I smiled, but my throat tightened so hard I couldn't get any words out. She must have sensed it. There was a pause. You okay? I I finally managed. I had lunch with Dennis today. She didn't say anything right away. I heard a car door shut on her end, then the soft click of a seatbelt. "What did he do this time?" she asked, voice dropping half a pitch like she was bracing for battle. I took a slow breath and told her the story, just the basics of what happened at lunch. She didn't interrupt, just murmured the occasional uh-huh. When I got to the end, I told them I won't interfere anymore. I won't wait for them to acknowledge me. She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "You finally said it." I sat down at the kitchen table, and that's when the tears finally came, quiet, heavy, sliding down my chin. Did I wait too long to see them for who they are? My voice shook. "Mary," she said firmly, "you didn't wait too long. You holding out hope? That's not foolish, that's faith. That's what people with heart do when it comes to family." I let out a shaky laugh, my voice catching in my throat. "You ran that restaurant for how many years?" she went on. "From pre-dawn prep to the last customer's bill, you did all of it alone. Why the hell do you need their permission to be proud of it?" I wiped my face with my sleeve. "I'm coming over," she said suddenly. "Don't argue. I know you're sitting there alone, curled up in that same kitchen chair." I shook my head with a smile. "You haven't changed a bit." "Good. I better not have. I was with you when we co-wrote that speech for the high school debate team at 15. I baked you a retirement cake when you turned 55. If I don't show up now, I'd be breaking the sacred best friend code." As she talked, something inside me began to ease. Half an hour later, she stood at my door, holding pumpkin cookies, 2 bottles of wine, and a whole bag of discounted multigrain pizzas from the store. When she stepped through the door, it was like a breeze blew the whole house awake. "I ran into Kathy on the way," she said, tossing her coat over a chair. "She's job hunting again. Said nothing's worked out since she left your place." "Kathy," I blinked. "I thought she went to that Mexican spot after she left?" "She did, but they switched owners. The new guy thought she was too slow and too meticulous. She told me she misses your kitchen the most." Something stirred in my chest. "You remember Tom, the old chef?" She opened the cookie bag, handed me one. "Saw him at the farmer's market last month. Said he's never found another kitchen that ran as smooth as yours." I looked at the cookie in my hand, silent. "Mary," she said, setting her wine glass down and looking straight at me, "have you ever thought about opening a new one?" I stared at her, stunned. "I'm serious," she said, eyes bright. "Not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because you still have it. The skill, the love, the soul, everything you poured into that place, it's still in you. You didn't lose it." "Linda, I'm 60, I said quietly, and she shot back, "You still cook. You understand people better than half the restaurant owners in this city. This is the era of community buzz, nostalgia menus, comfort food revival. Open something new. Mary's Table. I swear I'll blow up my entire Facebook feed." I looked at her, unable to answer. "You don't have to do it alone," she added, voice softening. "I'll front your first investment." I looked up, eyes suddenly wet again. "You're insane. Then you'll just have to be insane with me." She grinned like the teenage girl she used to be, the one who never backed down from anything. That night, we talked for hours about old staff, forgotten recipes, kitchen setups, and social media handles. I don't remember what time we finally went to bed, but I do remember this. Before I turned off the lights, staring up at the ceiling, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time: hope. The next morning, I put on my navy blue trench coat, slipped on my sunglasses, tucked a pen and notepad into my pocket, and walked out the door, forgetting my phone entirely. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't sit at home any longer, nursing hope like a lukewarm memory I was afraid to let go of. I drove past the street where my old restaurant stood. Dennis was still using the sign I left behind, those faded gold letters, chipped and weathered. He hadn't replaced them. Maybe he was too lazy, or maybe he thought they'd give him a little boost of nostalgia clout. But I didn't stop. I took a turn and veered onto another street, one I hadn't walked in over 10 years. It had changed. The old shoe repair shop was now an artisanal coffee house. The laundromat had been gutted and transformed into a cozy dessert cafe with wood-paneled siding and pastel signage. I parked and got out. I wasn't even halfway down the block before something stopped me cold. A gray-blue 2-story building on the corner. On the glass door was a paper sign, "For lease, contact L. Goldman." I stood there staring at that glass door for 2 full minutes. Then, with no idea where the courage came from, I pulled out my notepad and jotted down the number. Back in the car, I dialed it. On the 3rd ring, a low, male voice answered. "Hello?" I cleared my throat. Hi, I'm calling about the storefront on the corner. Is it still available? A pause. Oh, yes. Are you interested? I used to run a restaurant, I said, for over 20 years. I'm thinking of starting again. Well, then you've picked the right place, he said, his voice warm. Used to be a fast food spot. Kitchen equipment's still there. The utilities are live. It's not on a main strip, but being on the corner gives it good exposure. I get 3 or 4 calls a month. I tighten my grip on the phone. When would you like to see it? This afternoon. Perfect. I'll meet you there at 3 o'clock. After we hung up, I leaned back in the seat, eyes closed. My palms were damp, but my chest felt strangely buoyant. I drove straight home. Linda was standing in my kitchen, lifting the lid off a pot of porridge. Knew you'd skip breakfast, she said. I dropped my bag on a chair. I found a space. She nearly dropped the ladle. What, already? Corner spot. Used to be a fast food joint. I'm touring it at 3. She gave me a thumbs up with one hand while scribbling furiously with the other. Okay then, we need a checklist. Funding, staff, menu, launch buzz. I nodded but didn't speak right away. She looked up. What is it? I stirred my coffee slowly. I'm not sure if I should dip into my retirement fund. She paused. I met her eyes. That's my life savings, my fallback if I get sick or need long-term care. I'm not scared of losing money. I'm scared of giving it everything and still walking away empty. She sat down across from me, her voice soft but steady. Mary, I get that. I'm scared too, but tell me this. Aren't things already bad enough as they are? I nodded. That's why I'll use part of it. I've got a line I won't cross, but I don't want to rely on it entirely. Without hesitation, she said, then let me cover the rest. Mia just paid off her student loans. If I don't use my savings to back you, what am I even saving it for? My throat tightened again, but I didn't let her see that. That afternoon, we toured the space together. The moment the door opened, I was hit with a wave of smells, metal, grease, and the faint edge of mildew, the ghosts of a working kitchen. I walked through slowly, letting my fingers glide across the tiles and countertops, almost hearing spatulas clinking, voices calling out from behind the fridge. The landlord was straightforward. We signed a preliminary lease, and he threw in 2 months of free rent for renovation. When I got home, I pulled out my old phone book and started dialing. Tom, hey, Marlon, Lizzie, Kenny. Every call had the same reaction. You're really reopening? I'm in, Mary. I've been waiting for this day for 5 years. Count me in. My current job's a disaster anyway. I taped a sheet of paper to the kitchen wall, wrote at the top Mary's Table Rebuild List. Underneath, in 2 neat columns, completed, staff contacted, lease signed. To do, equipment inspection, menu draft, launch promotion. That evening, Mia came over with her laptop. God, Mom, she said, I'm building you an Instagram account. Also, we're making a teaser video for TikTok. I laughed. I don't even know how to spell TikTok. She rolled her eyes. Which is why you need your very own Gen Z branding consultant. We shot clips of simmering pots, spice jars, and handwritten menus. She recorded a voiceover of me explaining the meaning behind the name Mary's Table. That night, she posted the first teaser. A kitchen with memory, a table with warmth, coming soon. #Mary's Table, #back to flavor, #women who build. Watching the likes roll in, I felt something rise in my chest, an old but familiar feeling I hadn't felt in years. Excitement. On the first day of renovations, I laced up my beat-up sneakers, the same ones that probably should have retired when I did, rolled up my sleeves, pulled on a pair of gloves, and got to work alongside Kathy scrubbing down the greasy old kitchen hood. She laughed as we scrubbed. I honestly didn't think you still had this kind of energy. I grinned and tossed a rag at her. You don't get to call me old when your back cracks more than mine. We both burst into laughter, faces smeared with grime and oil. That afternoon, Tom stopped by to inspect the stoves. These burners may look tired, he said, tapping the side of one with his wrench, but the bones are solid. A good tune-up and they'll last. He'd brought his own toolkit and a fresh pair of gloves, already moving around like he owned the place, like he'd never left. Kenny and Marlon showed up soon after, and the place filled with voices, memories flying around like kitchen steam. Someone brought up the blizzard years ago when I delivered soup in person and nearly slipped on the icy sidewalk. Another remembered the Thanksgiving we gave out meals to the homeless, and the whole block ended up lining up outside our door. The warmth in that kitchen wasn't just the heat. It was history, alive and well, right there between the burners and the chatter. Mia showed up often, camera in hand. She snapped photos of every corner, documenting the journey in a series she called Kitchen Reborn, Back to the Flame, and Mary's Handwritten Menu. Within a week, our socials went from 0 to over 800 followers. "You've got fans now," she said, scrolling through comments. "Time to learn how to reply to them." I looked through the posts, blinking as tears welled in my eyes. I remember her corn chowder. She's back. My first buffalo wing was at her place when I was a kid. It wasn't that I wanted to be remembered. It was that I finally realized I had been. The name was set from the beginning, Mary's Table. Not grill, not kitchen table, because this wasn't just about food, it was about gathering, warmth, belonging. I brought back 3 of our most loved dishes, the creamy potato roll, the honey-roasted chicken pie, and my nearly impossible-to-replicate pumpkin bisque. Mia looked at the menu. "Don't want to add any modern fusion stuff, like Dennis did?" I shook my head. "I'm not chasing trends. I'm reclaiming flavor, my flavor." She nodded. "I'm clipping that for a promo video. That line's gold." We also posted open invites, asking old customers to leave handwritten notes about what Mary's Table meant to them. One elderly woman wrote, "Her place was the last date my husband and I ever had. I still remember the scallion cornbread that night." A mother and daughter left a note. "Mary taught my daughter how to hold a knife and chop onions. She's a culinary instructor now." Those words heavier than metal. During the renovations, I made a point to clean every table in the dining room myself, every day. The crew joked I was a workaholic, but I knew what I was doing. This was my love letter to the space. The night before opening, I didn't sleep. In a wool sweater, I paced the dining area, testing each chair, double-checking condiment placement, lighting brightness, scanning every menu printout for typos. At 3 a.m., I sat at a high stool in the kitchen and wrote out dozens of cards by hand, placing one at every table. "Welcome back. Thank you for remembering me. You helped bring Mary's Table back to life." Just before dawn, I glanced outside. The street was still quiet, but I could feel it waking up. The banner hung above the entrance read, "Mary's Table, the taste of home returns." Opening day shattered everyone's expectations. People started lining up before the doors even opened. "Mary, we've got to double the prep!" Tom shouted from the kitchen. Kathy ran outside with water bottles, apologizing. "Thank you for waiting, folks. We're almost there." I stood in the kitchen doorway staring at the sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces when a voice from the crowd rose above the noise. "Mary's back!" Applause erupted. For a moment I forgot how to move until Marlon leaned in and whispered, "Well, what are you standing there for? Open the doors, boss." And I smiled. It was the 3rd afternoon since we opened, and I had just sunk into the stiff, unforgiving office chair, hoping for 10 minutes of rest, when a familiar, agitated voice thundered from the front of the restaurant. "Is she here? I want to speak to her, Dennis." I recognized the tone instantly, impatient, simmering with barely restrained anger, and that righteous indignation he wore like armor whenever he felt cornered. I took a long breath, untied my apron, and stepped out into the dining room. He was standing at the front counter, flushed red, and behind him stood Mag, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold like a spectator who'd already decided the ending. Conversations halted. The room hushed until the only sound left was the hiss of the espresso machine behind the bar. "What are you doing here?" I asked, calm. "You're stealing my business," Dennis hissed, trying to keep his voice down but failing to hide the venom in his words. "You knew we were just a block away. This whole launch, it's a direct shot at me." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him. He pressed on. "You brought all the old staff back. Your menu's practically a replica. Even your marketing. The taste of home returns. You're trying to make people think you're the original." I stared at him for a few seconds, then spoke slowly and clearly. "Dennis, I am the original. These people, I trained them. These dishes, I cooked them for over 20 years. The name, it's my name. You're calling this theft? That's laughable." His face darkened. "You retired. You handed the restaurant to me, and now you open this right next door and just expect me to survive it?" A small, humorless laugh slipped out of me. "I didn't put you in any fire pit," I said, meeting his eyes. "When I gave you that restaurant, it came with loyal customers, trained staff, a working menu. You tore it all down." I stepped closer, voice still steady. "You want to blame me? You're the one who tore off the roof and then got mad when it started to rain." Mag stepped forward, tone icy. "You don't have to make this some morality play." If you really cared about your son, you wouldn't be competing with him on social media like it's some popularity contest. She glanced at the line of customers. You've turned your family drama into a PR stunt. Impressive. I looked at her squarely. You want to know what hurts the most? I said. It's not that you're ungrateful. It's not even that you've been cold. It's that you never once considered that I'm a person too. I paused. Not just your former boss, not free labor, not some convenient, disposable old woman. Mag scoffed. Come on, you started this whole place just to prove how much of a martyr you are. I didn't flinch. I started this place because I was tired of hiding in the little box you all shoved me into. I turned and looked around at the quiet crowd. When you left, I said, I didn't expect anyone to come back. But look around. I gestured to the dining room. They're here for the food, yes, but also because they remember a woman who treated every person who walked through that door like they mattered. Dennis opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then a man stepped out of the line, middle-aged, kindly, and laid a hand on my shoulder. Mary, I drove 40 minutes to get here, he said with a smile. Not to watch a family argument, but because when my wife was pregnant, you made her that chicken pot pie she still talks about. Someone else chimed in from the line. Your old recipes should have come back a long time ago. No shouting, no staged support, just voices, warm and grounded, speaking ordinary memories like they were the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment, I stood taller than I had in years. Mag tightened her grip on her handbag strap, turned on her heel, and stormed out. Dennis lingered. He stood there like he was waiting, maybe for me to say something that would make it all easier. I looked at him and said quietly, I don't hate you, Dennis, and this isn't about revenge. I just finally understand that what you wanted all along wasn't me. It was everything I gave you. He lowered his gaze, said nothing. I turned and walked back to the kitchen. Behind me, the bell over the door jingled, footsteps, then the gentle click of the door closing. He was gone. The storm began with an anonymous post that morning. Started like any other. Doors opened at 7:30, first pot of chicken soup simmering by 8:20, and pumpkin pie prepped and ready in the display case by 9 o'clock. Mia stood at the front counter, finishing our daily social update before the breakfast rush hit. Then her smile froze. Don't worry about it, she said, her voice just a touch too gentle as she walked over to me. Let me handle this. I wiped my hands and glanced at her phone screen. A post sat pinned at the top of the local trending page. Retired restaurant owner returns, stealing family recipes, poaching loyal staff, and sabotaging her own son's business. Where's the justice? Attached was a blurry photo of me and Kathy laughing outside the kitchen, vague enough to be deniable but sharp enough to stir gossip. The comments flowed like a burst dam. Real-life restaurant soap opera. Step aside, Bravo. Kids struggling to keep the family afloat and mom comes back swinging. Cold. Why would a retired grandma come back just to steal her own son's thunder? A few tried to speak up for me. You all know she started that place, right? She's the original chef. That's her recipe. But reason doesn't trend. I sat on the bench in the back, silent, throat dry as chalk. Mia scrolled, jaw tight around the phone. I know who posted this. It's someone from your son's circle. Probably that friend who's always liking and commenting on his store's page. I didn't reply. My ears were ringing, but the rest of the world carried on like nothing had changed. Customers came and went, Kathy took orders, Tom chopped carrots in the kitchen, Marlon greeted a familiar face at the door. But to me, it felt like I was locked in a soundproof box, watching everything slip through my fingers. By noon, a reporter from the local paper showed up. Black blazer, press badge, professional smile. Miss Mary, we received a complaint and were asked to follow up on accusations about copied menus and unfair competition. Would you be willing to comment? I looked her dead in the eyes, my voice calmer than I expected. Of course. You want to sit and listen or stay standing while I tell you about 20 years of building flavor from scratch? She blinked, then nodded and stepped inside. I sat her in the window booth and poured her a cup of coffee. Then I reached into the office and pulled out my oldest ledger, the one with 20 years of grease-stained pages, handwritten measurements, and scribbled menu drafts. This is my story, I said, flipping to the first page. Maybe read it before you decide whose version deserves ink. She didn't interrupt, just turned the pages slowly, occasionally whispering, wow. These sauces, the ratios, the same as your son's? I smiled. He learned them from me. but he cut the sugar in half. Customers hated it. You can try both and taste for yourself. She nodded, sipping her coffee. No more questions for now. The next morning, the paper ran the piece. She's not a copycat. Grandma making a comeback? She's the source, the origin of the recipe. And just like that, the tide began to turn. Old customers left comments on our page. Mary's return is the real comeback story. That pumpkin soup. It's not just food, it's memory. We remember the woman who greeted us by name and brought us warm bread before we asked. Someone even posted a vintage photo of me standing outside my old restaurant wearing a navy apron, smiling, holding a roast chicken platter. As Mia shared the post, she read one aloud. "Grandma, you're going viral." I laughed, eyes wet. "Let's just hope it's not that kind of viral." She nudged me, grinning. "You're crazy, in the best kind of way." But Dennis didn't stop. He posted a long statement on his business page accusing me of manipulating the media, emotionally blackmailing staff, and orchestrating a smear campaign. He attached a few selectively edited video clips painting me as some conniving old woman staging a PR war. That evening, I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the last of the sunlight fade beyond the windows. Linda walked in through the front, holding a printed editorial in her hand. She spread it on the table. No small talk. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." "But they'll think I stole their future," I said, my voice barely audible. She slid the paper closer. It was a screenshot of a new 5-star review posted just hours before. She didn't steal anything. She just finally chose to stop being robbed. I stared at that line for a long time, realizing I had been clenching my fists so hard my palms were damp with sweat. "Linda," I whispered, "did I make the wrong choice?" She stepped close and wrapped her arms around me, her voice soft but unshakable. "No, Mary, you didn't make a mistake. You finally stood tall." It was a gray day. While I was sautéing onions that morning, the sky outside looked like someone had whipped up a batch of meringue and forgot to fold it. Dense, heavy, and streaked with uneven whites. The air smelled damp, but the stovetop was blazing, and the clang of spatulas echoed through the kitchen like a familiar rhythm I could follow with my eyes closed. I was in the middle of prepping ingredients when Mia's voice called out from the front. "Mary, you've got a visitor." Instinctively, I wiped my hands on my apron and walked toward the dining room. From across the room, I saw him. Dennis. He sat tucked into a corner booth, head bowed, clutching that faded gray baseball cap he always wore like a high schooler summoned to the principal's office. I froze for a second, then nodded to Mia. "I've got it." As I approached, he looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, face tired, stubble misted in patches like he'd half tried to clean up. Even his voice, when it came, sounded sleep-deprived and softer than I remembered. "Mom." I sat across from him, didn't speak. He kept rubbing the rim of his cap between his fingers. After a moment, he said, "The restaurant's gone." I said nothing. Last Friday was our final day. "Mag," she left. His voice softened like the structure inside him was collapsing joint by joint. She said she was done, said this wasn't the life she wanted. Said she didn't want to be with a man who blamed all his failures on his mother. He looked at me, eyes dulled, stripped of defense. "Did you know it would end like this?" I inhaled gently. My voice came out clear and calm. "I never wanted you to fail. I just wasn't going to clean up after you anymore." He gave a hollow laugh and leaned back. "At first I thought you were doing it on purpose, trying to prove I couldn't do it without you." He glanced away. "But then I watched your place, the customers, the staff, the energy in there. I wasn't jealous, Mom. I was in awe." His voice dropped lower. "You still have that spark. You're still alive in it." I looked at him, and in that moment, memories hit like waves. Staying up late, filling out school applications, saving every extra penny to buy his first-year college books, mending his torn track pants, writing his first resume while he rolled his eyes. And now he was sitting across from me, whispering something I'd waited a lifetime to hear. "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes briefly. Yes, I had dreamed of hearing those 3 words. But now that they were here, they couldn't undo what had already been swallowed and buried, couldn't rewind the years I spent being invisible. "I don't hate you, Dennis," I said softly, "and I haven't been waiting for an apology." "Then why didn't you help me?" he asked, voice cracking with urgency. "We could have worked together. I could have listened. I would have—" I held up a hand, stopping him gently. It's not that I refuse to help, it's that you never once asked if I wanted to be respected. He clenched his jaw. I'm tired. I know, I said. So am I. But when you were tired, you came to me expecting support. When I was tired, I was told I was being too sensitive or that I was in the way. His eyes brimmed with tears again. You always saw me as a backup plan. No chef? Oh, Mom. Business down? Blame Mom. Life not going your way? Must be something Mom failed to give you. My voice stayed gentle, but every word landed square. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I leaned back and glanced out the window where the maple tree was beginning to shed its leaves. I used to see you as my whole world, Dennis, but now I know I'm allowed to have a world of my own. Silence settled between us, soft but final. Eventually he stood, held his cap in both hands. He looked like a boy who forgot his homework and couldn't lie his way out. So, can I still come by sometimes, eat your cooking? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked up at him. As long as you treat me the way you treat any customer, with respect. He nodded slowly, tried for a smile. It wavered, but held, and then turned toward the door. He didn't look back. It was a Monday, 6 months after Mary's table reopened, and we were closed for a day to fix the exhaust system. With no customers coming in or out, the restaurant was unusually quiet. The air still held the scent of yesterday's roasted pumpkin and honey-glazed chicken, clinging to the walls like a memory. I stood in the dining room, wiping down one of the tables. The wood grain curved in tight rings like tree lines, like time whispering, "You've come far enough." Mia sat behind the bar, sipping coffee while typing on her laptop. "We've got an interview next week," she said without looking up. "Local morning radio. They're doing a feature on the return of old-school cooking." I chuckled. "So, now frying a chicken earns you airtime?" She looked up, eyes bright. "You're not just frying chicken. You're the soul of this street." I shook my head, about to reply when the front door opened. Kathy, Tom, and Marlon walked in. They were supposed to be off today, but of course they showed up anyway. Said they didn't know what to do with themselves. Mia whispered to me. Tom brought in a pot of his own version of corn chowder. He set it proudly on the kitchen stove. "Try this. See if it's worthy of next month's menu." I took a spoonful. "You went light on the cream, but honestly, it's pretty damn good." He lit up like a little kid. Looking around at their familiar faces, something stirred in my chest, an idea that came to the surface quietly but firmly. "I want to make this place ours," I said. They paused mid-conversation, confused. I walked to the chalkboard wall near the front and wrote in bold, slow strokes, "Mary's table isn't just mine." I turned to face them. "I don't want to carry everything alone anymore. Not because I can't, but because I've finally learned that being independent doesn't mean fighting every battle solo." They slowly moved in closer. "I'm giving partial ownership of this place to you, my core team. Put it in writing, no ambiguity. This isn't about working for Mary. This is about protecting something together." Kathy's eyes went glassy. Tom nodded so fast I thought he'd hurt his neck. Marlon clenched his fist, voice cracking. "My wife's going to cry for a week when she hears." We stood in a circle, no ceremony, no handshakes, just a shared, unspoken weight of commitment. This restaurant was never just about food. It was a continuation of home for all of us who had been pushed out of somewhere else, trying to build a new version of belonging. That afternoon, I brought Mia into the kitchen. "Your turn to prep the roast chicken," I said. She smiled, tied on an apron. "Still cry when I cut onions." "Then wear goggles," I joked. As she chopped, I showed her how to build flavor, to trust her nose. I told her, "Your mom was falling apart after her divorce. I made this chicken every night. She said the best dinner of her life wasn't her wedding. It was here, at this table." Mia paused. "Do you regret being so good to your son?" "No," I said. "But I regret how long it took to be good to myself." She squeezed my hand. "I'm really glad you're my godmother." And for the first time, that old hollow space inside me didn't feel so empty. She asked questions like a real student. I answered like a woman who no longer needed to prove anything. That night, we stood under the warm lights. "What now?" she asked. "I won't be in the kitchen every day," I said. "It's time for a different kind of legacy, one I get to write." Days passed quietly. Mother's Day came again. This year, I didn't wait by the phone for Dennis. Still, I woke early, finished the menu. Tonight, 6 p.m., Mary's table. For every story that belongs to a mother. I dressed, slid on Mia's silver bracelet. For a classic woman with a little bite, she had said. At the restaurant, Linda stood waiting with sunflowers. Happy Mother's Day, Mary, she beamed. I'm the community mother now, I laughed. The door opened. Mia strung balloons. Friends arrived with cookies, cards, and love. Tom handed me a jar of folded notes. All the things you said to us over the years, he said. The first one read, "It doesn't matter what the customer orders. What matters is if they felt seen." My eyes filled with tears. Are we open for business today? Someone asked. I shook my head. No walk-ins tonight. We're only open for one purpose. We spent the whole day preparing. The kitchen simmered with pumpkin bisque and creamy braised chicken. Marlon baked his honey sweet potato tart. Tom insisted on making his signature corn pie and tested the crust 3 times to get it right. The heat in the kitchen felt like summer. Music played softly from the speakers. The whole place seemed to breathe, waiting for night to fall. By 6, guests began to arrive. The room filled quickly. Outside, the sky dimmed into lavender. Inside, the lights flicked on, pendants, sconces, and the small lamp beneath the handwritten welcome sign, all glowing like candlelight. Mia stepped up to the mic. Tonight, she said, her voice clear and warm, we're not telling a story. We're inviting every mother here to tell her own. The Mother's Day dinner at Mary's table had officially begun. I stood by a round table and raised my glass. I want to toast every woman who has ever been treated as obligatory, in the home, in the kitchen, in life. You are not the extra. You are not the help. You are not someone's old neighbor. You are the center, the flame, the reason this table even means something. Applause broke out, soft at first, then rolling like gentle waves from one table to the next. I looked around at the women in the room, some with silver hair, some still carrying toddler bags, some in pearls, some in sneakers, but all of them had that same light in their eyes. An elderly woman stood up, her voice trembling. My daughter asked me not to wear anything too loud to her wedding, so I wore a beige suit that matched the carpet. I smiled for photos, then cried alone in my room that night. But tonight I wore my red dress because Mary reminded me we are not decoration. Another guest, a single mother, shared how she gave up college to raise her son and went back to school 10 years later. I don't regret the sacrifices, she said, but I'm even prouder of the choices I'm making now. More applause. Then more. Mrs. Green raised her glass. Mary is the leading lady of this street. You didn't come back. You belonged here all along. I clinked my glass to hers and said, to every woman who's ever been underestimated, forgotten, or dismissed, but never stopped choosing herself. In that moment, I wasn't the neighbor lady anymore. I wasn't the kitchen helper. I was Mary. The name on the sign, the echo in their voices, the meaning behind the table. Later that night, Mia played a video she'd edited in secret, short interviews with women from the community. She showed me that 60 isn't the end, it's just another comma. For the first time, I'm proud to say, my mom is who I admire most. The room quieted. I stepped to the mic one last time. Last year's Mother's Day was one of the hardest days of my life, I said. But tonight, I choose to give it a new meaning. This isn't just a holiday. It's the day we take our names back. After the dinner ended, it took us over an hour to clean the place up. Mia was the last to leave, juggling her notebook, recording gear, and 3 leftover sweet potato tarts. As she jogged toward the door, "Don't wait for my reply, I'm editing all night. It's going live at 6 sharp." I laughed as the door closed behind her. The wind chime gave one last cheerful ring, and then everything went still. The restaurant was empty, just me now. I hung my apron on the hook by the kitchen door, then walked over to the tall stool near the window and sat down. Outside, the night was quiet, settled. A street lamp cast soft halos on the sidewalk. Across the road, Dennis's old restaurant sat dark, a for sale sign taped to the door. Chairs were stacked in a corner like forgotten bones. I didn't feel pity or triumph, just stillness. I remembered when he and Mag walked into my kitchen offering to help, and later introduced me as the old neighbor while I scrubbed dishes. I remembered the quiet apology he whispered years too late, but those memories felt distant now, like they lived behind glass. I had cried. I had been hurt. But I'd stopped letting their version of me define who I am. I looked at the old silver bracelet on my wrist, dull, worn, but still catching light. It had stayed with me through Greece, silence, and starting over. I used to bend for approval and still be dismissed. Then I fought for identity and was mocked for trying. But I no longer need labels. I know who I am. A breeze stirred outside. I turned off the last light and flipped the sign to closed. The lock clicked behind me. This place wasn't a disappointment anymore. It wasn't their failure. It was Mary's table, built by hand, reclaimed with love. I stepped into the night, walking slow and free, the air on my face like a quiet promise.